agroecology, if I have to find a new one, yin chang. So what came to my mind? That's it. So, komemodeze. It seems quite simple to me. It speaks to everyone. In any case, I think so. For the farmer, it involves making nature work as much as possible for him in his place. Obviously, certain constraints must be respected, notably obligations and economic imperatives. Often, when we make nature work instead of the farmer's interventions, be careful, nature already cannot do everything either. But it can replace certain interventions, but most of the time one must also be realistic. You have to slightly, not always, but almost always lower the production goals a little. Well, it's not an aberration. We can talk about it later if you want. For me, in any case, it's not an aberration to lower the production goals, because I believe we have a benchmark, that of intensive agriculture, which should be forgotten. Let me explain. I'm being a bit harsh by saying that, especially coming from and teaching in an agronomy school. But I believe we have benchmarks in terms of productivity, which are those of industrial agriculture, or at least high industrial input agriculture, which are not sustainable in the long term. And then I could also give you another lecture on that, the limits, mainly environmental, of high industrial input agriculture. It could go on for a long time. I have plenty. There are plenty of limits. That being said, we shouldn't completely blame this high industrial input agriculture either. In a certain way, it has benefited everyone, even if today we see its limits, some limits. We have all benefited from it. So we must know not to oppose things too much. Conventional farmers, very intensive, they responded to a certain demand at a given time. Some have difficulty getting out of that pattern, and then others got out of it a long time ago. But we are all in the same boat. And this boat, in any case, is a spaceship. It's not doing very, very well today, but we are all concerned with the same environmental issues because they will affect us all more or less quickly in the same way or almost the same way. So that's agroecology. I return to this slide at the scale of a farm. We can say of a farm. We could also discuss the two terms, why farm, why agricultural operation? That's another issue. But agroecology is not just that. Let's say the first point is the biotechnical dimension of agroecology. All right. So the farmer must learn to make nature work in his place. It's more or less easy, I should say. It's more or less easy on certain points. It's more or less difficult on others. And one thing is certain, he will succeed all the more easily or less difficultly if he is not alone. In wanting to embark on this adventure, not only does he need to have neighbors, if he has neighbors, continuing, having decided to pursue the same goal, he might succeed more easily. Because for one, he won't feel alone. He will be able to gather information, tips, sometimes technical, from his peers, his neighbors. But he must also be supported in this by his professional environment. So professionals from upstream, professionals downstream to the consumers. Let's say the farmer realizes that it is very beneficial for him to cultivate safflower because it produces a very interesting oil, which is economically well valued and will grow well on these dry and not very fertile lands. Once he has the safflower, what does he do with it? Sure, he can crush the seeds, make oil, and then every morning he takes a teaspoon or more of safflower oil. That's not what's going to help him to do things like changing the oil in his tractors, replacing a burst tire, etc. He needs to earn money. And so a whole socioeconomic system needs to be put in place to understand the importance of precisely establishing production systems that are always productive. So we're not going to talk about, I don't know if you've heard about the wheat record this year. The wheat record this year was achieved, as often happens, in New Zealand. I don't know if you have an idea how many quintals can be produced in wheat. Yes, it's even more than that. They are over 170. I believe it's 173 this year. Can you imagine 173 quintals of wheat? We're not even aiming for 100 quintals in agroecology. You know that the 100 Quintal Club exists in the northern half of France, in Bosse, etc. Here, it's not even worth considering. Not even in agroecology. The 80, so we will aim for targets between 40 and 60. Roughly speaking, it could be less. Exceptionally, it could be more. We need to revise productivity targets downwards. And when I say productivity, we should add an S to productivity. Because here, I just mentioned surface productivity, meaning yields. How many quintals or tons? It's almost the same. There's a zero difference. How? What surface productivity? A hectare is the unit of measurement for surface area in agriculture. But there are different types of productivity. There is labor productivity. A unit of labor, man, how much does it produce? Ultimately, how many quintals or tons of wheat does it produce? A cubic meter of water, how much biomass does it produce? There are several types of productivity. There you go. So we need to establish new benchmarks. It's an entire intellectual process. It's an entire economic organization, even socioeconomic, to be set up to make all this possible. I didn't want to go much further than that. I hope this definition, I elaborated quite a bit around these two sentences. There are no pictures, no diagrams, but I have tons of them in my courses. But I think that sometimes I overwhelm a little the students. We should ask those who are present in the room. But I hope that with this short definition, I have helped you better understand what agroecology is. If not, we can discuss it. There you go. And I could say, that the essential driver, I didn't include it, but it comes to mind now. And then I'll stop to give the floor to others. But the essential driver of this transformation is biodiversity. When we say allowing nature to work as much as possible in place of the farmer, it is biodiversity that provides the service. And indeed, scientists talk about ecosystem services.